Imagine a world without books. No libraries, no bookstores, no quick Google searches. A world where knowledge was a rare and precious treasure, locked away from the vast majority of people. This was the reality for centuries, in an era before the hum of the printing press changed everything. Today, we're going on a journey back in time to the heart of medieval Europe, to discover how ideas were kept alive when every single word had to be written by hand. Our story begins in the quiet stone-walled corridors of a monastery. In a time of widespread illiteracy and social upheaval, these secluded sanctuaries became the unlikely guardians of Western civilization's intellectual heritage. They were the libraries, the universities, and the publishing houses of their age, all rolled into one. Within these walls, a special group of men, the scribes, undertook a monumental task, copying the knowledge of the past, one letter at a time. Their workplace was called a scriptorium, a dedicated room for writing. Picture it, long wooden desks, the faint scent of ink and parchment in the air, and the only sound being the gentle scratch of a quill on vellum. Here, monks would sit for hours, days, even years, hunched over manuscripts. Their mission was to replicate everything from sacred religious texts and philosophical treatises of ancient Greece and Rome to works on astronomy, medicine, and law. Without their tireless effort, countless works that form the bedrock of our modern understanding would have simply vanished, lost to the decay of time. The process itself was incredibly demanding. It wasn't just about writing, it was an art form. First, the parchment had to be prepared. This involved cleaning, stretching, and scraping animal skins, usually from sheep or calves, to create a smooth, durable writing surface. A single large book could require the skins of an entire flock. Already, you can see why these books were so valuable. Then, the scribe would meticulously rule faint lines on the page to ensure the text was straight and uniform. The ink was often made by the monks themselves, a mixture of ingredients like soot, gum arabic, and water, creating a deep, lasting black. The writing instrument of choice was a quill pen, typically fashioned from the flight feather of a goose or swan. The tip had to be constantly sharpened with a small knife, a skill that every scribe had to master. Copying a text was a test of endurance and concentration. A scribe would have the original manuscript, the exemplar, placed beside him and would replicate it word for word, line for line. There was no room for daydreaming. A momentary lapse in focus could lead to a skipped line, a misspelled word, or a jumbled sentence. These mistakes, known as scribal errors, could be passed down through generations of copies, subtly altering the original text over time. Scribes developed their own shorthand and abbreviations to speed up the process, but even so, progress was painstakingly slow. To produce a single copy of a large book, like the Bible, could take a scribe more than a year of dedicated full-time labor. But it wasn't just about the words. Many manuscripts were transformed into breathtaking works of art. These are the illuminated manuscripts you might have seen in museums. The term illuminate comes from the Latin illuminare, meaning to light up, and that's exactly what they did. Artists, known as illuminators, would adorn the pages with vibrant colors and precious materials. They would paint intricate borders with swirling vines and flowers, create elaborate initial letters that could take up half a page, and even add miniature paintings depicting biblical scenes or daily life. They used pigments ground from rare minerals and plants, and most dazzling of all, they used gold leaf. The gold was either applied as a thin sheet or as a powder mixed into a paste. When it caught the light, the page would literally seem to glow, elevating the book from a mere object of information to a sacred vessel of divine wisdom. These illuminated manuscripts were the ultimate luxury items of the medieval world. Commissioned by kings, nobles, and wealthy church leaders, they were symbols of power, piety, and immense wealth. A single, beautifully illuminated book could be worth more than a farm or a house. It was a treasure to be protected, often kept under lock and key. This highlights the central reality of knowledge in this era. It was not for everyone. Literacy was a privilege confined to the clergy and the highest echelons of society. The common person had no access to these texts, and most couldn't read them anyway. Information was filtered, controlled, and distributed by a select few. The monastery walls weren't just physical barriers. They were intellectual ones as well. This system, for all its beauty and dedication, created a massive bottleneck. The slow, expensive process of hand copying meant that the number of books in existence was incredibly small. Ideas spread at a glacial pace, if they spread at all. The intellectual life of Europe was contained. limited by the sheer physical challenge of producing and sharing written works. A scholar in one part of Europe might have to travel for months just to consult a single manuscript held in a distant monastery. Collaboration was nearly impossible. The growth of science, philosophy, and new ways of thinking was severely constrained. But pressure was building. The late Middle Ages saw the rise of universities in cities like Bologna, Paris, and Oxford. These new centers of learning created a surge in demand for books. Students and masters needed more texts, and they needed them faster and cheaper than the monasteries could provide. Commercial scriptoria began to pop up in cities, employing lay scribes to meet this new demand. Yet, they were still bound by the same limitations of hand copying. The world was thirsty for knowledge, but it was being fed through a straw. This raises a powerful question, a question that hung in the air of the 15th century. What happens when ideas can no longer be contained? What happens when a society's demand for information far outstrips its ability to supply it? The stage was set for a revolution. The intricate, beautiful, but ultimately restrictive world of the scribe was about to be shattered. A single invention was lurking just over the horizon, an invention that would unleash the power of the written word, democratize knowledge, and change the course of human history forever. The era of the quill was coming to an end, and the age of print was about to begin. Imagine this. It's the mid-1400s, and you're walking through the bustling streets of Mainz, a vibrant city in what we now call Germany. In this world, books are incredibly rare and outrageously expensive. Each one is a work of art, painstakingly copied by hand by scribes, a process that could take months, even years. Information, knowledge, stories, they were luxuries reserved for the wealthy, the clergy, and the powerful. The average person might never even see a book in their entire lifetime, let alone own one. The world of ideas was locked away, accessible only to a select few. But in a quiet workshop, amidst the clanging of hammers and the glow of a furnace, one man was about to forge the key that would unlock it all. His name was Johannes Gutenberg, and he was on the verge of an invention that would ignite a revolution. Gutenberg wasn't a scholar or a scribe. He was a craftsman, a master of metal. His background was in goldsmithing and minting, intricate work that required incredible precision. He understood alloys, casting, and how to create detailed impressions in metal. Think about the fine details on a coin or a piece of jewelry. That was his world. This unique skill set gave him a perspective that no one else had. While others saw the problem of slow book production as a writing problem, Gutenberg saw it as a metal-working problem. He wasn't thinking about how to write faster. He was thinking about how to build words. This fundamental shift in thinking was the spark. He looked at the slow, laborious process of handwriting and saw an opportunity for industrial-scale replication. His idea was both simple and breathtakingly ambitious. Movable type. Instead of carving an entire page onto a single wooden block, which was slow and would wear out quickly, what if you could create individual letters out of a durable metal? You could arrange these letters to form words, sentences, and entire pages. Once you were done printing, you could simply take the letters apart and reuse them to create a completely new page. It was the ultimate modular system. This concept would allow for the mass production of identical texts at a speed previously unimaginable. It wasn't just about making one book. It was about creating a system to make infinite books. The potential was staggering. He envisioned a world where knowledge could be spread like wildfire, where ideas could cross borders and generations with ease. But having an idea is one thing. Bringing it to life is another. The challenge was immense. How do you create thousands of identical, perfectly uniform letters? Each E had to be the same as every other E, each A the same as every other J. They had to be precisely the same height to create a flat, even printing surface. If they weren't, the print would be patchy and unreadable. And the metal itself had to be just right. It needed to be soft enough to be cast easily, but hard enough to withstand the immense pressure of the printing press over and over again without deforming. Too soft, and the letters would squash. Too hard, and they would be brittle and crack. Gutenberg spent years experimenting in secret, tinkering with different alloys of lead, tin, and antimony. He was a perfectionist, driven by his vision. He needed to invent not just the type itself, but the entire system around it. The handheld mold for casting the letters, the special oil-based ink that would stick to the metal type but not soak through the paper, and of course, a press powerful enough to create a clear, crisp impression. He adapted a screw press, similar to those used for making wine or pressing paper to serve his purpose. Each element was a puzzle he had to solve, a new invention in its own right. His workshop was a laboratory of trial and error, filled with failed castings, smudged pages, and the constant pressure of dwindling funds, and the financial strain was crushing. This was not a cheap endeavor. The metals, the equipment, the workshop, the years of time spent without any income, it all cost a fortune. Gutenberg had to borrow heavily, sinking deeper and deeper into debt. He found an investor, Johann Fust, a wealthy moneylender who saw the potential but demanded results. Fust's investment came with a ticking clock. The pressure was on. Gutenberg was forced to work in secrecy, not just to protect his revolutionary idea from being stolen by competitors, but also to hide the true extent of his struggles and failures from his impatient backer. His dream was constantly on the verge of collapsing. Every failed experiment, every day without a finished, sellable product, brought him closer to ruin. Think of the scene. Late at night, in a hidden workshop, Gutenberg and his small team are hunched over their work. The air is thick with the smell of molten metal and ink. They are assembling pages of type, letter by tiny letter, backward, in a mirror image of the final text. The project they are working on is the most ambitious one imaginable, a complete Bible. It would require hundreds of thousands of individual pieces of type, a monumental undertaking. The financial and technical pressures are at their peak. Fust is growing impatient, threatening to call in his loans, which would mean foreclosure, the seizure of all his equipment, and the end of his life's work. Gutenberg has poured everything he has, his money, his reputation, his entire life into this single audacious gamble. The world outside his workshop walls remains oblivious, still relying on the slow, steady hand of the scribe. They have no idea that within these walls, a technology is being born that will fundamentally reshape society, topple monarchies, fuel the Reformation, and spark the Renaissance. But for all of that to happen, Gutenberg has to succeed now. He has to prove that his invention works, that it can produce a beautiful, flawless book that can rival and even surpass the quality of a handwritten manuscript. He is standing on a knife's edge between becoming a historical footnote, a failed inventor crushed by debt, and the man who changed the world forever. Could this risky, world-changing invention survive long enough to see the light of day, or would it be extinguished by financial ruin just before its moment of triumph? The fate of the modern world hung in the balance, forged in a secret workshop in Mainz. Ever wonder what the very first book printed with movable type was? No, it wasn't a celebrity memoir or a get-rich-quick guide. It was a book that would change the world forever, the Gutenberg Bible. This wasn't just about printing a book. It was the spark that ignited a revolution in how we share information, an explosion of knowledge that echoes right into our digital age. But why the Bible? Why this specific book to launch an invention that would define an era? Let's dive into the incredible story of a world on the brink of change, a revolutionary inventor, and the book that started it all. Imagine a world without instant news, without libraries in every town, without a book you could just buy and take home. That was Europe in the mid-15th century. Knowledge was a rare commodity, painstakingly copied by hand, one letter at a time by scribes and monasteries. A single book could take years to produce and cost as much as a house. This made books exclusive treasures, accessible only to the church and the ultra-wealthy. Information was slow, expensive, and controlled. But in Mainz, Germany, a goldsmith named Johannes Gutenberg had a radical idea. He saw the future, and it was a future where knowledge could be mass-produced. So out of all the texts in the world, why did Gutenberg choose the Bible for his grand experiment? It was a brilliant business decision. In 15th century Europe, the Bible wasn't just a religious text. It was the asterisk book. It was the center of spiritual life, education, and culture. Every church, monastery, and university needed one. Wealthy nobles and merchants desired lavish, illuminated Bibles as symbols of their piety and status. The demand was enormous and constant. Gutenberg knew that if he could produce Bibles that were not only cheaper, but also faster to make than the handwritten manuscripts, he would tap into a guaranteed market. It was a high-stakes gamble. He was betting his entire fortune on the idea that he could replicate the beauty of a manuscript with the efficiency of a machine. To understand just how revolutionary Gutenberg's press was, you have to understand what it was replacing. A scribe, hunched over a desk for months, even years, would meticulously copy a text line by line. It was slow, grueling work. Mistakes were common, and each copy was unique, with its own set of errors and variations. Gutenberg's system changed everything. He created individual metal letters movable type that could be arranged to form words, lines, and pages. Once a page was set, he could print hundreds of identical copies in the time it took a scribe to produce just one. The speed was breathtaking, but it was the consistency that was truly game-changing. Every copy of page 57 was exactly the same. This meant knowledge could be reproduced and distributed with an accuracy never before possible. It was the birth of mass communication. He wasn't just printing books. He was standardizing information. When the first Gutenberg Bibles appeared around 1455, the reaction was a potent mix of wonder and mistrust. Imagine seeing a printed book for the first time. The pages were perfectly uniform, the text flawlessly aligned. To people accustomed to the slight imperfections of human handwriting, it must have looked like magic or perhaps something more sinister. Some whispered that such perfect, rapid duplication couldn't be the work of human hands alone. Was it sorcery? Was this new technology a threat to the sacred tradition of the scribe? There was a real fear that these mechanically produced books lacked the soul and sanctity of a hand-copied manuscript. But for scholars and clergy who saw the potential, it was a miracle. Suddenly, the Word of God was more accessible than ever before. It was a moment of profound disruption, where the old world of the scribe collided head-on with the new world of the press. Gutenberg's invention was a triumph, but his personal story is a tragedy. This groundbreaking project was incredibly expensive. To fund it, he borrowed a huge sum of money from a financier named Johannes Fust. Gutenberg poured everything he had: his time, his money, his genius into perfecting his press and printing the Bibles. But before he could truly reap the rewards of his labor, Fust sued him. The court ruled in Fust's favor, and Gutenberg lost everything. His presses, his type, his stock of finished Bibles, all of it was handed over to Fust, who, along with Gutenberg's own skilled assistant, continued the printing business without him. The man who had given the world the gift of mass knowledge was left bankrupt and stripped of his own creation. He had invented the machine that would empower millions, but he himself was left powerless. So Gutenberg, the inventor, was defeated. He died in relative obscurity, his name nearly lost to history for a time. But the idea he unleashed? That was a different story. The printing press could not be put back in the box. His technology, now in the hands of others, began to spread like wildfire. From Mainz, printing presses popped up in cities across Europe. The cost of books plummeted. Ideas, once confined to the halls of power, now flowed into the streets. Literacy rates began to climb. The Protestant Reformation, the scientific revolution, the Enlightenment, none of these would have been possible without the rapid, widespread dissemination of ideas that Gutenberg's press enabled. The inventor may have lost his battle, but his invention won the war for information, reshaping civilization in ways he could never have imagined. In the heart of the 15th century, a revolution was quietly brewing, not on a battlefield, but in the workshops of artisans. The invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg sparked a fire that would engulf Europe, spreading with the speed of a wildfire. By 1500, printing presses were operating in over 270 cities, churning out books and pamphlets at an unprecedented rate. This was not just a technological leap. It was the dawn of a new era of information. This new technology found its most potent use in the hands of a rebellious monk named Martin Luther. In 1517, when Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the Wittenberg Castle Church, he had no idea he was about to become the catalyst for the Protestant Reformation. But thanks to the printing press, his ideas, which challenged the very authority of the Catholic Church, were not confined to a single church door. They were copied, printed, and distributed across the continent in a matter of weeks. The 95 Theses became the first mass media event in history, and Luther, the world's first best-selling author. The floodgates of knowledge were thrown open. For the first time, the Bible was translated into vernacular languages and made accessible to the common person. Literacy rates, which had been stagnant for centuries, began to climb as people were eager to read the scriptures for themselves. This democratization of knowledge empowered individuals, fostering a culture of critical thinking and questioning authority that would have been unimaginable just a century earlier. The world was waking up from a long slumber. But with this new power came a new threat to the established order: governments and the church. terrified of losing their grip on power, scrambled to control the flow of information. Censorship became a weapon, with lists of banned books and printers facing persecution. Yet, the harder they tried to suppress these new ideas, the more they seemed to spread, often driven underground, passed from hand to hand in secret. The very act of printing became an act of defiance. The printing press had unleashed a force that could no longer be contained. It had proven that an idea, once it takes root in the minds of the people, is more powerful than any army. It begs the question, a question that echoes through the centuries and into our own digital age. Once ideas can spread instantly, can authority ever fully contain them again? Have you ever stopped to think about what makes our modern world, well, modern? We talk a lot about the internet, about digital revolutions, and how information travels at the speed of light. But what if I told you the single most important invention for our modern minds wasn't a silicon chip, but something far older, made of metal, wood, and ink? Let's rewind the clock. Not just a few decades, but over 500 years, to a time when books were rarer than jewels, and knowledge was a treasure locked away for the very few. Imagine a world without books. Not just without e-readers or tablets, but a world where a single book could cost as much as a house. Each one was painstakingly copied by hand, a process that could take months, even years. Errors would creep in, copies of copies becoming distorted, like a game of telephone played out over centuries. Science, philosophy, history. It was all whispered, passed down from master to apprentice, or chained to a desk in a monastery library. This was the reality for most of human history. Knowledge was scarce, and because it was scarce, progress was slow. Then, around the year 1440, in Mainz, Germany, a goldsmith named Johannes Gutenberg had an idea. It wasn't entirely new. Woodblock printing had existed for centuries, especially in Asia, but Gutenberg's innovation was a game-changer. Movable type. He created individual letters out of metal alloy that could be arranged and rearranged to form any text imaginable. He combined this with a screw press, like those used for making wine, and a new oil-based ink that would stick to the metal type. The result? The printing press. Suddenly, producing a page of text went from taking hours to taking minutes. The first major book he printed was, famously, the Bible. But what came next would shake the foundations of Western civilization. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a quiet, steady, and unstoppable flood of paper. For the first time, information could be duplicated perfectly and cheaply. A single press could churn out hundreds, then thousands of copies of a text, and every single one was identical. The age of scarce, guarded knowledge was over. The age of mass information had begun. So how did this lead to a revolution in science? Before the printing press, a scientist in England might make a groundbreaking discovery, but it could take years, even decades, for his counterpart in Italy to hear about it if he ever did at all. They were working in isolation. But with printed books, everything changed. When Copernicus proposed that the Earth revolved around the sun, his book, De Revolutionibus, could be printed and distributed across Europe. Astronomers from Spain to Poland could read his exact words, check his math, and build upon his work. This created a feedback loop of discovery. Scientists could now debate, critique, and collaborate across vast distances. Galileo could read Copernicus. Kepler could read Galileo. Newton could read all of them, synthesizing their work into his laws of motion and universal gravitation. He famously said, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." The printing press provided those shoulders. It allowed for the standardization of data, charts, and diagrams. A drawing of a plant or a map of the stars was no longer a unique, hand-drawn interpretation. It was a perfectly replicated image that scientists everywhere could trust and reference. This shared, verifiable knowledge was the fuel for the scientific revolution. But the impact wasn't just confined to the halls of academia. As printing became cheaper and more widespread, a new kind of literacy began to emerge. It wasn't just for priests and nobles anymore. Merchants needed to read contracts. Artisans wanted to learn new techniques from printed manuals. And as more people learned to read, the demand for printed material exploded. This gave birth to something we take for granted today: the news. In the 17th and 18th centuries, newspapers and pamphlets started appearing in cities across Europe and the Americas. For the first time, ordinary people could read about current events, political debates, and ideas from far-off lands. Think about the power of that. A farmer in a small village could read a pamphlet arguing for new rights and freedoms. A shopkeeper could follow the debates happening in Parliament. This created a public sphere, a space where people who would never meet could engage in a shared conversation about how their society should be run. Rulers and governments quickly realized the power of the press, both as a tool for propaganda and as a threat to their authority. They tried to control it, to censor it, but the ink was already spreading. Ideas about liberty, democracy, and individual rights, championed by thinkers of the Enlightenment, were no longer confined to intellectual salons. They were printed, circulated, and debated in taverns and coffee houses. The American and French revolutions were, in many ways, revolutions born on the printed page. Pamphlets like Thomas Paine's Common Sense sold hundreds of thousands of copies, galvanizing public opinion and turning a protest into a full-blown war for independence. This new media landscape laid the groundwork for everything that followed. Newspapers created a sense of national identity, connecting people across a country with shared information and stories. The rise of the novel in the 18th and 19th centuries allowed people to step into other lives, fostering empathy and a deeper understanding of the human condition. Education was transformed. Textbooks could be mass-produced, making standardized schooling possible for millions of children. The printing press democratized not just information, but education itself. It's easy to see the parallels to our own time. We talk about the internet creating a global village, about social media shaping political discourse, about the explosion of information at our fingertips. But all of this is an echo of what happened over 500 years ago. The shift from a world of information scarcity to one of information abundance changed humanity forever. It rewired how we think, how we govern ourselves, and how we understand our place in the universe. The printing press wasn't just a machine. It was an engine for modernity. It gave us the tools to question authority, to build on the knowledge of the past, and to imagine different futures. Every time you read a book, a newspaper, or even the text on a cereal box, you are experiencing the legacy of Gutenberg's invention. It's the silent, invisible infrastructure that underpins our entire world of knowledge. It was the original information superhighway, a network built not of fiber optics and code, but of paper and ink. It was the first time humanity could truly speak to itself across time and space. So the next time you scroll through your feed, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information coming at you, just remember, this isn't a new phenomenon. We've been here before. We're living in the second great information explosion. The first one started in a small workshop in Mainz, with a press that changed the world one page at a time. Thank you for watching until the very end. If this story sparked your curiosity, imagine what the next one will reveal. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe because the next mystery is already waiting.